This video was brought to you by Debunked. More about that at the end of the video. You ever have one of those moments where you're revisiting something from your past, something that used to feel so normal, benign, or even positive at the time, but when you re-encounter or reflect back on it years later, you suddenly realize just how messed up it actually was? Like when you joke about your childhood trauma, assuming that everyone experienced the same thing, but instead of laughing, the whole room just goes silent and everyone gives you sad eyes? Or when you go back and watch an old comedy show that really didn't age well, or you read through your old journal entries or social media posts and suddenly realize that you've actually come a long way, but used to parrot some pretty ignorant ideas and possess some kind of backwards perspectives. And sure, if we're constantly learning and growing, I think that's normal, and at every point in our life, future us won't be able to look back at current us without having a tinge of the cringe. Over the last decade or so of deconstructing my faith, I've had a lot of those moments where a religious idea that sounded so totally normal in the presence of new information becomes jaw-droppingly awful. Ideas which I was once conditioned to believe, even cherish, suddenly I start to see them in a very different light. One such example happened to me just recently here in Brazil. There was a specific Christian idea which was instilled in me repeatedly since childhood, which I once yearned and hoped for as a Christian, but that I now realize is incredibly dark, toxic, and actually a bit of a nightmare. What's up, everybody? Right now I am in Rio de Janeiro behind the iconic Christ the Redeemer statue. Now, don't get me wrong, I love it here in Brazil, and this monument is extremely impressive, but no matter where I go in this city, this gigantic religious monument hovers overhead, staring down from his lofty perch. It watches as I wander the city, watches me eat breakfast. It even feels like Jesus is watching me poop, assuming he can see through walls. Don't worry, I'm not going crazy. Yet. But it does kind of make me wonder if Statue Jesus' X-ray vision is thwarted by sheets of lead like Superman's.
Harrison? Harrison!
6.
You better not be going in there to vape again.
3.
Oh, no, you don't. Tissue?
Raised in the church, time and time again, I heard pastors celebrate God's omnipresence and omniscience, quoting verses where God says things like, "The eyes of the Lord are in every place, watching the evil and the good."
Behold, I am with you always.
Or,
He said, never will I leave you, and never will I forsake you. This is God's promise.
I'm watching you, Wazowski. Always watching.
growing up in youth group, we even sang a song with the lyrics, "Where can I run from your presence? Where can I run?" Which comes from a psalm talking about how no matter where you try to flee from God, you can't escape him. And even if you just want to be left alone, so you take to the skies or make off to the underworld, even there, his, quote, right hand will take hold of me. Several years back, I was in a pretty emotionally abusive relationship with an anxious partner who didn't care much for healthy boundaries. And I remember Googling signs you're in an emotionally abusive relationship while I was sitting on the toilet with my phone, because that was the only time that I had any semblance of privacy. And after just 5 minutes, she pounded on the door and accused me of trying to get away from her by taking long poops. I didn't realize just how unhealthy that dynamic was, because not too many years before that, I was straight up rejoicing at God's all-seeing nature and took comfort in the fact that he was always there with me no matter what. And for us naive little youth group kids, God was an ever-present, tender-hearted father. But while healthy parents respect their kids' autonomy and teach them to become more independent, God wasn't just around to turn to if you were hurting, lost, or confused. He was constantly there holding your hand, like it or not. A crutch for loneliness, a personal backseat speed trap cop. And yet we viewed it as an ever-present comfort in times of trouble. In a way, kind of like jolly old Saint Nick.
He sees you when you're sleeping.
Okay, admittedly, the lyrics of that Christmas song make Santa seem creepy as hell, but if you stop and think about it, the portrayal of the Christian God is so so much worse. Instead of a jolly old man who brings gifts for the good children, this God demands unending, groveling worship. And instead of the bad kids just missing out or maybe getting a lump of coal in a sock, which their mom has to wash later, he also benevolently punishes these naughty kiddos with torture and hellfire forever. A punishment entirely disproportionate to the finite crime committed, unless they repent of everything that they've ever done and worship the very ground that he walks on. Sure, Christians might retort that he's there to mercifully save them, but to save them from who? Who is it that they believe is keeping score, tallying up their every misdeed? Who is it that wrote the rules that they have to live by? Who is it that they believe made this entire system, rigged in such a way where they were born sinful, doomed to fail, and commanded to be perfect?
It makes us objects in a cruel experiment whereby we are created sick and then ordered to be well.
An impossible feat under pain of eternal torture. And just who exactly do they claim made this eternally scorched prison for them in the first place? Oh, but that's not fair. He showed just how deep his love was for us by killing his own son for a couple days. Forgive me for not being impressed by the oh-so-benevolent mercies of this mythological monster that they choose to worship, but I didn't ask him to do that. I didn't ask to be born. Did I have a say in original sin? I'm sorry, but all of this feels pretty non-consensual to me. Because this, my friends, is not what a kind, healthy relationship looks like. This Christian take on God normalizes narcissistic abuse because they're taught that it's the embodiment of goodness, even how God behaves. This teaches Christian children to cling to an absolute egomaniacal psychopath and tells them that they can never escape his domineering presence. It makes countless Christians blind to this kind of abuse. Without even realizing it, otherwise loving parents are normalizing unhealthy behavior to their children, and their children are being groomed for toxic relationships because in one-on-one situations, this kind of behavior is psychological and emotional abuse. At scale, it's textbook, fear-based authoritarianism. And it would make me wonder if this was where Orwell got his inspiration from, except that Orwell's dystopia was a mild frolic in a field of dandelions when juxtaposed next to this never-ending barbaric nightmare. At least Big Brother couldn't read people's thoughts, or judge them for feeling anger, or damn them for having oh-so-harmful lust-filled fantasies play out in the privacy of their own cranial jelly. Do we really want everything we've ever done, every thought we've ever had but never acted on, to be logged and recorded, remembered and used against us? Is this really a fantasy worth craving? And before any of you rattle off some BS retort of, well, if you've got nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear, tell me that you've never had a shameful, intrusive thought that wouldn't go away, or done something inappropriate, embarrassing, or messed up in some way that you wish you could forget. Getting called out for such actions in public is the absolute worst, but can you imagine if every single wrong thing that we did, said, or thought was logged for divine sentencing, if you were made to feel worse than dirt for being the filthy sinner that you were created as, but then you're at least oh so mercifully given the opportunity to grovel and worship before the all-seeing watcher. Somehow that doesn't really feel like a gift. And yet this is exactly what most Christians I know believe and yearn for. It's the hand they reveal when they gleefully blurt out to an unconvinced atheist that you'll see, when you're burning in hell, you'll see. And yet almost no Christian that I know seems to really grasp the consequences of having an omnipresent judge. So they engage in wishful thinking, hoping, believing that the endorphin-induced goosebumps and butterflies that they get when they force themselves to believe hard enough are somehow evidence that God is currently with them. But my God, am I glad that a goosebump is just a goosebump, and a shiver down my spine isn't some supernatural entity tickling my backbone. Because isn't social media bad enough? I mean, hell, I can't tell you how many times I've seen someone canceled for posting something politically incorrect to their feed and thought to myself just how lucky I was that these platforms weren't around to capture my dark, unfiltered high school humor. Because who hasn't said or done something that they regretted and wished that they could forget? Who hasn't gotten away with something that they're now ashamed of? stuff. And I don't mean wiping a booger under the desk or farting in an elevator and blaming it on a kid, or hiding your morning wood in church with a Bible. On a side note, I'm convinced that 90% of guys who hold their Bibles like this while singing in church are actually hiding awkward boners. Until recently, the notion that everything we do could be recorded, analyzed, and punished was laughably infeasible. Even the Snowden leaks about the NSA revealed that there was so much data captured, but not nearly enough manpower to process all of it. 1984's version, with someone watching a two-way TV in every house, would have required unscalable manpower. But with the rise of AI, sensors and mics on every phone, and cameras on every street corner, this dystopia grows ever closer. Hell, in parts of China with their ever-growing social credit system tracking the population's every move, it's rapidly nearing reality. But China doesn't threaten eternal hellfire. They might if they could, who knows. But the Christian God does, and Christians are okay with it. Even take comfort in it at times. They grovel and beg for forgiveness and tearfully confess their every sin before a divine creator. To my American audience, I just have to ask, if you're conservative and you care about my freedom, if you believe that the Second Amendment exists to safeguard against authoritarianism, that every human has a right to privacy, and that the government shouldn't be able to illegally search your home, why the hell do you find the thought of an omnipresent cop comforting? And just think about how absurd this thought is. Do you give half a damn about the thoughts of an ant or the actions of an amoeba? Highly advanced aliens probably don't visit Earth simply because we're too primitively stupid and insignificant for them to even take interest. Just how egocentric do we have to be to believe that an infinitely powerful, all-knowing, ever-present deity gives two shits that you touch yourself at night? Dylan. Or the fact that I just said a naughty word. Gasp. Look, when you live with a partner or a family member long enough, you inevitably come face to face with their flaws, and in a healthy relationship, you learn to understand, forgive, and accept each other. You know that underneath that skin sack is an imperfect human being just like you, with big flaws, but an even bigger heart. And sure, it's nice if they apologize for their messes, but you don't require them to grovel and beg for forgiveness, and choosing to forgive them doesn't make you worthy of worship. Good people choose to see the good in other people, because good people know that they themselves make mistakes too, and this world sure as hell could use more compassion. We don't need the threat of an all-seeing eye or omnipresent overlord to keep us in check. We screw up, we learn, we grow. That's not to say that actions should never have consequences, and sometimes our screw-ups are embarrassing as hell, but other times we're grateful that nobody caught what we said. Others tend to quickly forget our most humbling moments, even as we continue to beat ourselves over the head for it. And this social shame is usually bad enough. It's a brutal teacher that keeps us pining over our failures long after everyone around us has forgotten all about them. Our loved ones just forgive us. They don't need a blood sacrifice to do it. We move forward, doing our best to be better people, learning to show grace to the other imperfect screw-ups that we surround ourselves with. And we do all of that out of a desire to grow and a love for others, not because someone's always watching. And sure, if you don't believe in hell but buy into a more soft, loving teddy bear of a Jesus, it would be nice to know that we had an all-powerful, loving Father helping us through life's difficult moments. But think of it so. Every time that you thought God gave you strength or guidance, that was actually you. You reached down deep. You pulled it out from within yourself. Because you are an incredible badass, capable of so much more than you know. When you needed guidance, that trusty voice in your head was your intuition. And when others came at just the right time to help you, they weren't magically sent from God. You simply experienced the kindness of others. Because that is what true, healthy, actual kindness looks like. Since I started reconsidering my faith nearly a decade ago, this has hardly been the only religious idea that I've reevaluated. But deconstructing your entire worldview is hard, and establishing a new set of beliefs based on truth can be even tougher, especially when we're surrounded by a sea of competing ideas, which is why I recommend, past me? What the heck are you doing? Well, I'm trying to figure out how the world works using logic and reason and science and critical thinking, but just when I thought that I had it all figured out, this theologian named William Lane Craig started blasting me with religious apologetics, and his word salad is so confusing. So I've mapped out all of his arguments in the form of logical syllogisms, and now I'm going through Wikipedia and memorizing an extensive list of logical fallacies and trying to see if any of his arguments hold water. Dude, why don't you just play Debunked? What now? There's literally a card game that you can play where you pair fallacious arguments with the logical fallacies that they commit. It's super fun, fast-paced, and has hilarious illustrations. Plus, you and your friends learn how to spot logical fallacies and think more rationally. Won't that make William Lane Craig cry? That's half the fun! But it sounds too simple. I still need to memorize all these arguments first, at least, right? Nope. You just need to know the rules of the game, which take like 2 minutes to learn. Well, I need to know all the logical fallacies at least first. Not even. You don't mean to say that I just wasted the last 10 hours writing out all these syllogisms? Can't I just, finish them first or something? I only have a few more hours to go. I mean, you can, but why reinvent the wheel when Debunked is so much easier and way more fun? Plus, this way you don't have to give up your social life. Just click the link in the video description below and snag your copy of Debunked today. Trust me, you'll thank me later.
Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause.